Hi there. Hi, all everyone. Hi there. I'm Clifford Bates, and this is not a live stream. I apologize. As last week, also, I'm doing a pre. I'm busy. I'm going to have a very unpleasant task on Friday. I have to go to. For example, Thursday and Friday, there's a conference going on. I need to go to it. Simply because I was criticized that I don't go to enough conferences. Um, uh, to be honest with you, half the conference is a waste of time. This is going to be about religions and politics. It's going to be half the conference. It's going to be. It's going to be. And I think this will be kind of interesting because I know people who are going to be giving papers. I just didn't plan a paper on it. If I was someone I was invited to do something, I might have done something because there's the criticism. I don't do enough conferences. It's always funny that when there is a conference, I don't hear about it. When I do have a conference, it's usually interferes with my teaching time, and therefore you get criticized for rescheduling classes. So I'm dealing with crap at the university, administrative issues that's unpleasant, and lawyers and things. Um, then I am also now dealing with, well, I promised you guys to do it. Uh, Live streams. I tried Friday live streams. I was going to do next week. There will be a live stream. I'm really scheduling it because it's the monthly live stream in that sense, the monthly one, because it's December. Even though December starts on technically it starts on Friday, I think, yeah, for first. Um, and of course, it's not the computer's not being friendly. It's saying, "I don't want to work with you because you're just a nasty racist." Um, yeah, Friday will be the first. So I don't usually like to do it on a Friday. This the first. I like to do the second week, or at least the first, if it's a full week of that. So we'll do next time. We'll see. We'll have the Friday live stream. Um, I was also thinking about doing a book chat, a book club thing. But um, I mean, I was thinking about it, but then I said, I mean, last week I kind of did one. I did talked about the books I was reading, and I spent a lot of time on the books. Last week we had a technical glitch that whew, computer crash. No, something was going on, and a problem happened with power. I hit the button and I hit the stop button rather than the pause button. Um, Therefore, we had last week we had two videos because they really should have been edited together. Um, this is going to be relatively short in that sense. I promise. Um, I noticed some people have been finding my videos on. They run across one of the older videos and they say, "Oh, this is useful." I'm glad for that. That is kind of why am I doing it? Last week, I kind of talked about this, the Hollow Crown Eliot book. I spent a lot of time on this. Eliot's book about Shakespeare on leaders, on how leaders rule and fall. Right. Um, I think I would recommend again. I would strongly recommend people who are interested in this. Shakespeare is always good to read in that sense. Shakespeare is one of those wonderful things. In fact, I would recommend Shakespeare in the sense that, particularly to understand English political history, like the person who influenced one of the people who influenced me was like George Anastopoulos. Um, uh, uh, Anastopoulos, who's famous among the Straussians. I mean, he was a kind of liberal in the sense. Well, he was a strange fellow. George Anastopoulos became famous in the sense that he was a World War II vet, navigator, a pilot, but also a navigator in B-29s. He basically World War II fought in every theater of the war, and At the end of school, went to the University of Chicago and finished his for law graduate studies and law studies. With his study with Strauss, but also did law school. And the famous case was that at the Chicago bar and the Illinois bar, asked him the question about the right to revolution, and he goes, "Oh yeah, Declaration of Independence," And then I thought that they asked him the question, "Well, are you a communist?" Because he's said, "Yes, there's a right to revolution. Yes, yes, there's a right to revolution." And he's saying this like in 1950s America, and then he quoted the Declaration of Independence, and they went back and forth on this. There's a right to revolution. Um, then asked him, "Well, that's are you a communist?" And he was taken aback by the whole question because saying that I'm not going to answer that question. That's a stupid question. That's really a silly question to ask me. It's not. And that became the basis of him getting denied the bar, and then he appealed it. It went two times to the Supreme Court. There's that famous dissent by Justice Black. Um, I think it's Black. Yeah, I think it's Black. Uh, yeah, Black. Justice Black says that we shouldn't be afraid to be free. Right, that famous line on Henry Anastopoulos and other cases. We shouldn't be afraid to be free. Anastopoulos spent his whole life teaching at a little bit at Loyola. He was at University of Dallas after Kendall died, flying to teach from Chicago. He stayed and loved it. He loved this Chicago. He wasn't going to move in that sense. He was taught at this school and um, this Catholic school in northern in the Illinois area. What's his name? I forget the name. It was run by nuns. And then he taught at Loyola University, Chicago, at the law school for like until the end of his life. And there was controversies because reading a course on Declaration of Independence, students accused him of racism. This was like in the '90s. And it was a whole he notoriously wrote lots of our books and lots of articles, review articles. He was very prolific, and he really loved Shakespeare, and he did good things in Shakespeare. And in his book on the Constitution, he wrote two volumes. The Constitution 1789 and the amendments to the Constitution of the United States, and basically written around the same time as the anniversaries, 200th anniversaries of both things. In the book on the Constitution of 1787, Anastopoulos makes a point that one of he said gives the different constitutions of the United States. And he even says, listen, it's the English language, right? And then he talks about Shakespeare and Shakespeare's role in shaping the English language and our understanding of political things. Um, and to be honest with you, this is something that, Aristotle really thought that, listen, that the Americans understood English political history and political thinking through Shakespeare's history plays, particularly the history plays that dealt with the English Constitution, right? From John King John to Henry VIII, and then the famous the Henriad, Richard II, then Henry the Fourth, Part One, Part Two, and Henry the Fifth, then Henry the Sixth, Part One, Two, and Three, and then Richard the Third, and then Henry VIII is bookmarks, right? This is very much. The Shakespeare plays that are kind of an important kind of frame of this, of understanding the kind of how Shakespeare, poet, puts together the kind of lessons of political history in that sense. And again, this is why this book is a very good. And in fact, if you want to see the Harrow Crown, you can. I think it was Hallmark in the United States, but I think maybe BBC and other things did the plays on two. There's two Hollow Crown and the continuation Hollow Crown, the Roll of the Roses. Um, um, my only gripe with Richard. I mean, I wish they kept the actors. I wish they kept some of the actors the same in Henry this, because you don't understand why it goes from Jeremy. Henry who becomes Bolingbroke, who becomes Henry IV, um, goes from being one actor then to Jeremy Irons for the whole thing, and then what's his name? Oh, come on, I know is the name of the actor who plays Loki. Um, he on in the Avengers, or in the Marvel universe. That's bullshit. Um, he plays Henry, both Henry the Fourth Part One, Part Two, and Henry the Fifth. And Cumberbatch plays the young Richard, Duke of York, and both in I think part two and part three of Henry the Sixth, and then Richard the Third, of course, because he plays Richard, young, yeah, the young Richard. Um, why that's I mentioned that it's I mean that's not. Then there's also, if you want to really see, the Age of Kings by the BBC, the Age of Kings series by the BBC, all black and white, which has very famous actors in it, including Sean Connery and other actors, playing different characters in it. It's black and white and it's staged right. But if you want to see real actual plays, you can watch the videos. You can watch The Age of Kings by the BBC, or you can get the Howard Crown by Hallmark, and I don't know who else. You can find it on Amazon or one of the on my DVDs things, and you can watch both the first Howard Crown, which is the Henry ad, and that. Now, why am I saying this in that sense? Because it is the kind of understanding of political history, but it's framed. I would frame it. You need to read it, King John, which is a very odd play, in the sense because something is very conspicuous in the play of King John. The issue is legitimacy and illegitimacy. And this, who is the legitimate heir? Who is the ultimate legitimate heir? In fact, maybe an illegitimate heir would be a better heir than the actual. In other words, this whole question. And what's missing in King John play would have been, it is the whole absence of question of Magna Carta. Okay, the very one of the most important aspects one thinks of about the reign of King John and what happens to John. Um, would be the question of Magna Carta, and this is something that is silenced. The threat of the French king that will come with the side of the barons is mentioned, but Magna Carta is completely don't have it in the play. Um, but John, you have to understand, John it's with John and the reign of Richard II. Richard second son, the second son. Not Richard II, Henry the second. Henry the second, sorry, not Richard II. Henry the second. Henry the Henry the second, the father of the Plantagenet order, the Plantagenets, in that sense, is his first son dies, and the second son would be Richard of Lyons, Richard the First, right, and who does not have any children. Also, in the play, he does. He has a bastard. The bastard is his illegitimate son. The Eleanor of Aquitaine is very present in the movie. The mother of John is really the force pushing John and rejecting her other son's child to claim it, because the argument is that the older son his child should be the king, not John. Also, the question of who is the legitimate heir, and the question of this legitimate why should John be king? And the moving of Eleanor sides with John against this battle of mothers. Eleanor of Aquitaine versus the uh, mother of the heir of the son um, of oh, come on now, I know it's Edward. I think it's Edward, who becomes the Duke of Brittany. He becomes the Duke of Brittany in that sense, and that what happens is that the wife of Edward, I think it's Edward or Jeffrey. Sorry, Jeffrey. I'm sorry, Jeffrey, Jeffrey's wife, and then the son Arthur. Arthur is going to be king. The young boy Arthur, who should be king because his brother Jeffrey was, his father Jeffrey was older than John, so it should go through succession. But no, what happens is instead of having the young Arthur be king, Eleanor sides and supports her son John. And this is the really crux of the play, and the fighting about the question of who should be king, and the French king acting as a mediator between the dispute, and then what happens is then it's a and then the papal nuncio coming involved in the role of the church, and the question of should the church have a role in the authority of the English crown. Shakespeare's King John is a very powerful play in this regard, but the absence of Magna Carta is a very interesting thing. It sets the question of succession, and the question of succession sets up a very important issue because we get the same problem at the beginning of Richard II, who's this. He is this case of the succession following correctly. In other words, the eldest son, Edward, Edward the Third. Sorry, um, Edward the Third, great king. Really the successor of like more of his grandfather than of his father. This pathetic father. Edward conquers and becomes the great you know initials the start of the 100 Year War with France, right? Makes the deal, and his son, the great captain, the great warrior captain, the Edward Black, Prince of Wales, Edward the Black Prince, conquers, captures the French monarchy, and makes a side deal that holds off power, but doesn't. This gives money to the English and power to the English, not the crown. But at the same time, it sets the dynamic. Now he's going to be the king, but his father does. He dies before he becomes king, but his son, young son, becomes king, not his brother. Okay, so in many ways, King John, the play King John, and Richard II are kind of parallel opposites in that sense. What happens, and that you have one that violates succession, but then has a problem of, well, John isn't the most scrupulous person. John is in many ways, will betray Arthur, keeps his promise, and kills Arthur, has Arthur killed. And actually, the whole theme of Arthur, right? The Arthur aspects, the young Arthur, who's the son of Jeffrey. Um, why that's Shakespeare does this whole thing about the question of leadership that shapes us, and that through the whole the story of the English Civil Wars. Now, what's Shakespeare is relying on Holinshed's chronicles of the war. I mean, this is not real history; it's a drama. So of course, it's like watching television to get movies to get history. But this is myth. This is myth making. This is political myth. This is poetry. This is the poet, and why again. This is why Cohen does a very good job explaining how Shakespeare gets us a psychology of the leader, the psychology of the actors. Not only we get the psychology of, we get every character in that sense. We see the characters and we get into their mind and their motivations and try to understand something in this case. And this is to understand the question of this. Now, what's so interesting about this book is it's a very well written book. Cohen is a good writer. As I said to you guys last week, it's basic books. It's like how Shakespeare, the formation of, the structure of the argument is very straightforward. Acquiring power, exercising power, and losing power. Um, this is a fantastic book in that regard because you get a sense of this question and that why I think this is worth looking at again, and would be worth looking. I'm not trying to sell books, but like I said, I have my Shakespeare up there, my complete works of Shakespeare of that. I have my whole. Oh, to be honest with you, let's do this. Okay, all right, I have to move that a little bit. Here is my whole. I got the signets. This is when about a year or so ago we did the whole monster series, and that's the whole English plays. You have the edition, and Signet is a good edition because this is what you use to high schools. What Signet is interesting because you have commentaries at the end. Signet always has this tradition of the Signet editions were nice because they had the critical aspects, they had the introduction and overview, but then they would have interpretive commentary. Where is the table? No table of okay, there it is, table. See, like they'd have the structure, and they would have the play, they would have the textual notes, the sources of the thing were the sources that were used, and then you had commentaries. And at the time, these were older commentaries, not necessarily new. In fact, because they were older, they're usually better than the new ones. And today's politically quick quote stuff um, would probably not be. So they had some of the old classic commentators on these questions, um, and also commentaries about other people's editions, other people's Henry Richard III's. So therefore, you had, like I said, you had. What's so interesting is the edition, the the Shakespeare edition, Henry King John Henry VIII, are together in one volume. So it's very interesting in that sense, the play, and that how these two plays, these are the bookends of the British history, that what we call the history plays. The English history plays in that sense. You're set with the English history in that sense. Now, even though some people argue that King Lear is ancient history and Titus Andronicus, mm, that's Roman, late Roman Empire uh, um, plays. Shakespeare, you had Shakespeare. You had the Roman plays, which you have a poem. You have the Rape of Lucretia, the poem. It's not a play. The Rape of Lucretia. Then you have, uh, 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 of course, Coriolanus. That's a later play. Julius Caesar. Then you have Anthony and Cleopatra, right? The classic Anthony and Cleopatra. But then you also have what we say is the Titus Andronicus, right? In that sense, which is a very difficult play in that sense. Um, the Roman plays, there's lots of commentaries on the Roman plays. One of my favorite people is, come on, where do I have it? It's Paul Cantor. Paul Cantor, who died last year. Shame that he did. It's shame. He has a whole YouTube. They have YouTube things of his commentaries on this. Okay, we almost had another disaster because of a problem. So, like I said, John, these little additions are fantastic. So you have the bookends, right? The bookends, the John that. Then you start, of course, with Richard II, which is the disposition of the king, which is kind of nice continuation. It's the inverse of what happened with John, right? With the young boy getting the legitimate heir, getting it, but then what happens is he's ill suited to be the king. He misgoverns, and the famous scene of England. It's John Galt, his uncle, giving him the rise of John Galt's son, Henry Bolingbroke, um, which sets forth that. Then we have the Henry this is the older edition. Well, they say new revised, but they have the the Henriette, right? Henry the Part One, Henry the Fourth Part One, and Henry the Fourth Part Two. Of course, there we get the young Prince Hal. We get with um, oh, come on, you have the famous case of oh come on, I know the come on the character I'm trying to think about is um, my brain is going completely blank right now. Uh, Falstaff, yeah, Falstaff. Brian, brain dead. Falstaff and Prince Hal. That the rise of a prince, and then Henry V is the peak of him becoming prince, and he's the great prince in that sense, and how Machiavellian he is, and that's what even I the idea is the discussion of how the difference between a prince who's not prop he doesn't he educates himself by not being a prince and understanding the law, right? And then here is the problem of the child prince, right? Henry the Fifth, Sixth, the son of Henry the Fifth, who is king of France and loses France and is ruled by a woman, his wife, uh, and the rise of York, the War of the Roses. This is the War of the Roses in that sense. The argument is that maybe it shouldn't have been um, Bolingbroke who's king, but rather another lineage has a more valid claim to be king, and that therefore this is the undoing of the whole fight, and that um, the Lancastrian versus the Yorkist claims of the Plantagenets in that sense. And the fight between the red and white rose, right? Um, this is the uh, uh, you know, and where you get the rise of my this great great stories in that sense. There's this the rise of first Richard Duke of York and his tragedy in the middle second play, the second play, the tragedy of Richard Duke of York, which is what happens is that come on, um, part two is I think that's part two is the tragedy of yeah no well it's not the death of good King Humphrey, right? Second part of Henry VI, the downfall of Humphrey, right? And it's with three, the death of Duke of York, right? The tragedy of Duke of York, um, and the rise of the sons to comes up with it. Um, this is the great, very odd book in that sense. And part one is I think you get uh, um, Joan of Arc. Yeah, part one you get the loss of France with the rise of the wife and the Duke of Beaufort and where's the Dauphin Duke last, who else? Yeah, and I think the uh, 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 the French sergeant, Duke of Orleans, the Bastard of Orleans, the governor of Paris, um, um, uh, uh, the or I mean, I think it is Marie, not Marie, Joan, yeah, Joan Le Purcell, Joan La Purcell, commonly called Joan of Arc, right? That she is the interested here. So one is you get the loss of France, the rise of Joan and the defeat of Joan, then the fall of the the fall and the downfall of Duke Duke Humphrey, Great Duke Humphrey, Humphrey, the brother of King Henry V, the uncle of Henry VI, Henry VI, who's kind of the protector and guardian, because it's the young king still, and the role that his wife will play. That he will marry, he will lose France, he will lose what's left of his claim in France to get his wife Elizabeth, and then what happens is with or Margaret, sorry, not Elizabeth, Margaret, it's not Elizabeth, Margaret. Uh, who's Margaret and is it yeah, the Queen Margaret, right? And this is the class, the conflict of this, and the consequence, and the rise of the claim of Duke of York, Richard Plantagenet, right? And then the sons of Edward's Richard and primary Edward C. afterwards Richard III, right? And then there's the other son that we talked about, Clarence, right? Um, then what we have is Humphrey, Duke of Buckingham, but then what you have is what? Richard of Warwick, Lord, where's the bad guy? Where's the bad guy? I think is well, he has two. There's two Humphreys. Humphreys, Duke of Buckingham, is the bad. The I think he's the that. It is Duke Humphrey, Duke of Gloucester, who's uncle to the king and protector, and that's it. The demise of the protector, right? And then you get Richard III, right? Which everyone likes to talk about. Richard the Machiavellian France, right? And I think Cohen does a very good job of highlighting the ways the play highlights the question of gaining power, leading it, making decisions. Um, so that's been I think I spent time today talking about the Cohen book and why the Shakespeare looking at Shakespeare's political teaching in terms of the English history plays were of some interest in that regard. I understand why people uh, um, Holocron, a book by Cohen, is a very good book. There's other um, those of Pardini. How should I say his name? Nima Parvini, or a academic agent on the thing. He was a Shakespeare scholar. And I was wondering why he doesn't do more. He wrote a book. He wrote like three books on Shakespeare, um, um, and his more about ethics. He does with the ethics, not political things. I would think he would do it. In fact, was it Parvini? I mean, I have to be careful because I don't want to misrepresent what he does. But Parvini is um, okay. He's a writer. He's sorry. I'm got the I got the we got, I'm just um Shakespeare's, yeah, 2018 was Shakespeare's Moral Compass, was his last Shakespeare book. Um 2012, he wrote 2012, he had two books. One was Shakespeare and Contemporary Theory, which is basically he's attacking the new criticism, and his Shakespeare's history plays, which I was actually not impressed that much by. I thought it would be a much better book. Um, oh yeah, so no, that's not, the Shakespeare history play 2012. So therefore, the 2012 he had two books that the history plays. I was actually kind of disappointed by the history playbook. Um, um, because I would think this would be a good opportunity for him, but this is the early. He's younger scholar, just new. He's got his reputation started. Not even reputation. Yeah, not even done YouTube yet. He's still kind of an academic, a teacher. Um, no. um, the Shakespeare history play was, to me, was what was so um, disappointing in that book was what was the most disappointing. I should have stopped it and looked at this. Okay, okay. Um, it's Edinburgh Press. Okay, it's an academic press. I understand, but 2012. Again, he's very much tied with the question of attacking the new historicism. His whole thing is attacking the new feminism and new historicism and the way they distort the text. He is kind of a defender of the older methods. He doesn't know the Straussian literature at all. The Strauss implied, the Strauss kind of informed material on the student, Alan Bloom, or there's a whole school of people who wrote, Strauss students. Jaffa and Bloom wrote a series of essays that published in the American Political Science Review in the 60s. And then they published a book together in University of Chicago Press. Um, the Parvini book is, to be honest with you, it's like part two is the title of his 2018 book, Shakespeare's Moral Compass, right? Which I find funny that therefore this is the book on his. Oh no, sorry, that's okay. Sorry, that is his Moral Compass book. Why? Ooh, the Shakespeare history plays. Rethinking that is actually his Moral Compass book, which is a funny thing in that sense. Uh, okay, I'm looking at this. Sorry, I'm looking at this from the shocking aspect of. I'm looking at his. It said Moral Compass, and no, it's not the Moral Compass. This is his Moral Compass. Sorry, I'm just looking at the thing right now, and I'm talking to you guys. Maybe I should have done this. I'm not planning on it. Um, I want to talk about Pravini's history, his place where play in a little bit, because I think it is worth talking about. Because his Moral Compass book is much better in terms of looks at the moral dimensions. In many ways, I think it looks at the question of the moral development of character that I think is that Pravini tries to get to in his thing writing at the time. It's a pain in the ass. Hold on, I'm fighting it. Um, I hate when you don't have a nice, clear download. Okay, there. It's not a clear download. I got something, but it's 3 seconds left. Sorry, I'm just doing it. I'm hoping that this is done right and not a mistake. Again, yeah, it is the book. Okay, sorry. I apologize. It's again the book is if we look at the point of view of this, it's a continuation of his other book, his earlier book on introduction to new historicism, cultural materials, in chapter 3, the argument against the anti-humanists, and then only do we get like Shakespeare in historical context and context in the 6th chapter, and then personal action, agency in Henry V, and ideology in Richard II and Henry V. Um, it has no engagement with the vast literature I know in political theory that deals with these things. He talks about it's all kind of his war with the new historicists in that sense, attacking the new historicists and the critics of the text. Right? He talks about the a new historicist, the cultural materialist, and the humanists, and then which are the literary critics and the evolutionary critics. Right? He talks about um, again, therefore, the formalists and still working on with a materialist framework in that sense, the pessimists and well, he gives this whole dichotomy, including the Marxist writers, which is Gabriel Egan. He talks about. Um, Again, this is kind of like a kind of theoretical. He's attacking Shakespeare's historic this kind of thing. Then his chapter on the new historicists, right? He attacks the new historicists. How you could put fames on the plays is trying to show how they're historical understanding their critic. In other words, it's kind of a literature review attacking the literature review, not to the texts themselves. And the plays themselves are worth talking about in terms of the context of the political teaching, right? So it's rethinking historicism, the framework of this is, and dealing with the kind of scholarship of this, and attacking then cultural materialism. I you know I'm I, again I was disappointed by the Pavini's Shakespeare book, not his no his other book. His the Moral Compass book was actually pretty good when we got to the Moral Compass about how we did it. It was this Shakespeare. I mean, here I was expecting a lot from the history play in that sense because here you get the crux of the question of Shakespeare, the political dimension of Shakespeare, which in many ways we tend to forget is very no, it played a very important role of this. In fact, this is why I mean, you look at something like Tocqueville's Democracy in America, where Tocqueville talks about that the Americans, he does that scene where he goes into the countryside and goes meets this. He describes his account going into the frontier, and he meets this log cabin, and they all these people, and they're having a camp. They're having all these cowboys, not cowboys, but these frontier people who are doing this. And what happens? The account is that what is it? They're surprised by what is it? Let me see if I have. Yeah, it's 538. 538. He goes. This is part two. This is what? This is part two, uh, volume two of the Democracy in America, volume two, part one, chapter 12, right? 53. Chapter 3, I'm going to need my glasses. I'm old. There's two references Shakespeare. Yeah, 538. So it's chapter 13. He goes. It's the literary aspect. The literary aspect of democratic centuries, right? And then he goes. Though America today is perhaps less concerned with literature than any other civilized country, one does not meet any individuals there who are not interested in things of the mind and who, if they do not devote themselves their lives to studying such things, nevertheless savor the charms in their hours of leisure. Most of the books these people want are supplied by England, however. Nearly all the great English works are reproduced in the United States. The literary genius of Great Britain still shines its rays in the depths of the New World's forest. There is hardly a pioneer hut in which the odd volumes of Shakespeare cannot be found. I remember reading the feudal drama Henry V for the first time in a log cabin. In other words, in the first time I read it in the log cabin. So that's a great reference to that there. And the other Shakespeare line that's in this is uh, 864. Yeah, 864. Oh, this is a note, one of the notes, which she deals with the note, volume 2, part 3. He's a travel diary, he says. I made the passage, he talked about this, and he goes, we entered the log house. The interior is in no way reminiscent of the pleasant cottages of Europe. There's more of a superfluous and less of the necessary. There is only one window, and a muslin curtain hangs in it, crackling in the heath on the heath of a packed earth, uh, 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 crackling on the heath of packed earth is a large fire, which illuminated the whole inside of the house. Above the heath, one can see a beautiful carbine, a deerskin, and some eagle feathers. To the right of the fireplace, a map of the United States is displayed, and the wind blowing through the chinks on in the wall lift it up and causes it to flap about. Nearby, a shelf of rough-hewn timber sits 6 volumes, among which I note is a Bible. I notice is a Bible, the first 6 cantos of Milton, and 2 plays by Shakespeare. Chests rather than wardrobes line the walls, and the center of the room is crudely made table has a feet of green wood with the bark still attached. The feet that seems to grow out of the earth they stand on. On the table, I see a teapot of English porcelain, silver spoons, some chip cups, and a newspaper. Right. So this is the Tocqueville's famous description of visiting a cabin in the frontier in that sense. Okay. Now, and Shakespeare's there. Shakespeare's always been there in that sense. And why did I read that? To those two passages from Tocqueville and that's Shakespeare. Is that this is the way that our consciousness of English political theory and English ideas and political lessons. Shakespeare is a great teacher in that sense. Shakespeare is probably one of the greatest teachers that we have in terms of understanding judgments, leadership, and questions like that. I mean, I've always, it's always shocked me how much we diminish, um, the import of such thinkers in that sense. So, again, that's. I hope you guys will understand that and will understand why I did today's little thing on focus a little bit on Shakespeare and talk about it. As you know, we're finishing the Schmidt. I haven't recorded anything last week, and I don't think I'll record anything this week. Maybe Saturday and Sunday I might get some recording done. I have a lot of work to write, editing and editing to do in my own piece of work, and I have a bunch of tasks to do this week, so it's kind of like, ugh. And teaching is still teaching. Um, my students have their topics due, so therefore that's going to be their topics for their research thesis are due, and then I have to submit them to the committee that approves them, the scientific committee. I have one student who just lost completely, and I have another student who I'm responsible for, but I haven't really heard from him. And it's like I don't really understand this, bad management of things. Well, that's it. I'm not going to talk too much more. If you've liked it, like it. If you don't like it, don't like it. Please give me topics that you want me to do on Fridays. Please, it would be useful. I know somebody said, "Why don't I do Burnham?" But okay, I might do Burnham one day. I'll talk about it maybe. Um, I think I've done Burnham a lot already, but Burnham is, and actually, the managerial revolution. To be honest with you, is dated. The overall argument of it is, I think, right, but there's an aspect of datedness to it that it doesn't understand the economics, and that how the change of economics would change that change the way what management is meant, and the tying of the connection between management and administration. That's the other thing, the administrative state in that sense, the connection of this. Um, so those of you who want to do interested more in the Schmidt things, we should be finishing Schmidt this coming week. Next week we'll start. We finished, like I said, this week we should have finished Rousseau up completely. I think this is the end of Rousseau in that sense for a while, and then we will then start next week on all Schmidt to the end, and it'll be 2 weeks more, and then so we're gonna be so by next time we meet on a Friday, we'll have only one more week of Schmidt left, and then I plan to turn to Aristotle. I think I will do ethics. I will do the ethics. I'm kind of crossing fingers, and I'll do it. We'll see how I feel in that sense. I might take a Christmas break off. I don't know what's going on. I'm kind of in a social mood, and I have a lot of work to do, or trying to do some editing and things, and also deal with the problems I have at university. Well, that's it. I'm sorry my voice is kind of like, oh, I wish I could say more. It's been nice to be with you. Take care. Mm, If you like it, like it. Like, don't like it, don't like it, as it says. You can follow me in social media. Links are below. If you're, again, if you're not subscribed, subscribe and get others to subscribe. Um, the academic social media links below too. The social media links, and then this academic social media. You can follow me at my scholarship, left of my scholarship. Um, and then last but not least, you can help me on Patreon, but who cares? No one does really care. Um, I should actually stop asking because no one bothers anyways. It'd be nice if someone did, but um, that's it. So please give me some questions, some issues that you want me to deal with. Um, I think I'm at the end of my energy today of this. I'll take care. Bye bye. Have a good weekend, and see you later. See you next. See see you next week on Schmidt, and then see you on Friday. Maybe will be the live stream, the monthly live stream. Bye bye.